Welcome back to T. Shaw's Progressive Bluegrass. Season 2 has been so much fun for me. I really hope it's been as much fun for you. I feel leaps and bounds better about Season 2. But for those of you that heard every episode, I'm still making some mistakes. I still have a lot to learn. I'm really excited what Season 3 has in store. But for today's episode, we're going to celebrate Season 2. I'm going to go through a few highlights from every show this year, a refresher for some, a recap for others, and I think we're going to have a lot of fun. So going back to Episode 2, where I had Josiah Nelson from Mountain Grass Unit on board. Any of you that have been listening from the beginning, my second episode was reviewing Mountain Grass Unit after my first time watching them. And as I've said many times since then, I'm never going to review a band or an album ever again. That being said, I knew Josiah long before he was involved with Mountain Grass Unit. And when he discovered, found, heard of, whatever you want to call it, the episode from Season 1, where I did say many nice things, but I also offered some criticism, regretfully so. And he had just discovered it when he was in the band with The Van. And he texted me or messaged me, I can't remember which one, said, "Hey, we just found the Mountain Grass episode of your podcast. We're going to check it out now." Cringe. I immediately apologized and said, "I'm never going to review a band again, but I'd love to have you on the show. Let's talk." And he said, "Absolutely, it'll be great. Would love to." I wonder if he would have felt differently after he listened to that episode. But either way, he unintentionally became my first guest of Season 2. And we had a chance to essentially talk about everything since he's been involved with Mountain Grass Unit. And a really exciting opportunity for them when they played at Renewal, Billy Strings' festival. And they ended up sitting in essentially for Billy Strings on the first night because he flew home to have his first child. Congratulations to Billy and Allie. So now I'm going to take you to the refresher of the conversation I had with Josiah, where he tells us about his time with Mountain Grass Unit at Renewal. Let's go there now. Well, and you had mentioned that you were recently at Renewal, and surely everybody listening to this knows Renewal was Billy Strings' festival, and right before he was supposed to take the stage, he took off for more important things, obviously, and to have his first child. But I want to hear about your Renewal experience.
I don't know. It was such a amazing experience out there. I mean, I guess I'll give like a kind of a rundown, like timeline of what happened, So the night before we were supposed to go to Renewal, this was at the same time as the hurricane that tore through Asheville and everything was going on. And I was already in Colorado, but because of the weather, Luke and Jury's flights got canceled. And so, which in the grand scheme of things with what happened with the hurricane was not a big deal. But luckily they were able to get on a flight the next day. Their flight landed, I think, at 11 a.m., and our first set was at 3 in Buena Vista, and they landed in Denver. So, I mean, I picked them up from the airport.
How far is that apart?
It's about a 3-hour drive.
Okay.
And so we just booked it to the festival. I mean, we just got in the car.
No time to spare.
No time. We get to the festival, and finally we get to the gate, and somebody had zip tied it shut, and they couldn't find something to cut it open. And it was a whole thing. Anyways, we finally get through the gate, and we get to the stage 10 minutes before our set starts. And somehow we were able to set up all of our gear in time, and we're ready for downbeat. And it was, I kid you not, basically from that moment, it was 2 days of just straight hauling between stages and playing music. But anyways, back on track. We got that set done, and we get in the.
This was Friday?
Yes, this was Friday, the first day of the festival. And we get in the van, or I guess golf carts, go back. This was at the soapbox stage. We go to the main stage, and we sit down for dinner because, keep in mind, we really hadn't had time to really eat or do anything since we picked them up. And we get into the dinner table, and it was kind of just us. And then right after we sit down, Billy's whole band comes in, and Billy was going to sit at another table, and Drury asked him to come sit with us. And so we had dinner with Billy, and we just had all these conversations about just music that we liked. And I was telling him I bought his new pedal, and I was looking forward to using it that weekend. And we come to like talking. Luke asked him about, hey, we cover some of your songs, and if you know anything about our set list, not every time, but quite often we'll cover one or two Billy songs, And we asked him like how he felt about that, and he kind of
we don't want to step on each other's set lists.
Yeah, and of course that weekend we had, I can't remember, it was like 7 sets that we had planned out, and none of them had Billy songs because it was Billy's festival, and we didn't want to step on that, But he kind of gave us his blessing and said that he was honored that we did it, and we were just so thankful. And of course, we finished our dinner. We go back to the other stage. We get this call, said, "Hey, emergency, come back to main stage, possible sit-in." And so we go back to the main stage, and we weren't really sure what was happening yet, and we were kind of sitting around
a song or two.
Yeah, we were like trying to think like, what
are we gonna play?
Jury was like, "Oh, maybe I'll sing like Big River or something," Nothing Billy, because usually, when people sit in with Billy's band, they play other songs, not Billy songs. But then, like, finally we find out that, what had happened, and, like, by the time we were back, keep in mind, this was like 10 minutes after we had dinner with Billy. He was already on a plane to go be with his wife, who was having a baby. And Billy's manager, Bill, was, like, asking us, like, what song do you guys want to play tonight? And Drew was like, Big River or whatever. And the guy's like, no, Billy songs. And so we went into the festival planning like not to play any Billy songs. And there it is, Billy's manager, Bill, telling us we had to play a Billy song.
Yeah, you're doing Billy's set.
I know. And so Luke and Jerry get up and played, like, they played Turmoil and Tinfoil that first night. And the crowd just, they were kind of, concerned because they go to this festival thinking that they were getting, Billy, and, they didn't end up getting Billy. But luckily, Luke and Jury knew Turmoil really well, and the crowd just ate it up. And we get off, and Scotty, who's kind of the promoter of the festival, he runs Bonfire, was like, hey, pencil in a main stage slot tomorrow. And so we weren't supposed to play the main stage the next day, but we ended up getting an afternoon set, and it just ended up being so incredible that day. But it was really like, just so much happened in like just a few hours.
I wasn't at renewal, but I was looking at just the band lineup going into it, and I'm like, holy cow, that festival is going to be worthy of attending even if Billy wasn't there. And then, of course, when Billy had to bail, I'm like, that's still the best bang for the buck going anywhere. That festival was just stacked with talent.
It was incredible. And I will say, like, they had to pivot really hard to make it work. Scotty and Billy's team, they turned it into this big, just like celebration of music with the people who were there. So, that first night, Stickley got up, and Larry Keel and Luke and Jerry. And then the next night, Jerry Douglas, Molly Tuttle, and then all of us in MGU got up. And, it ended up being this like really special event with music that, you wouldn't have got if it was what was supposed to happen. Like Alex Hargraves got up and sang some songs and just doing all this out there material that just wowed the audience. And I would say like nobody who went there was upset with what happened. They were, I think, happy that Billy made the choice to be with his wife, something that Billy's never going to regret, And then the day after the festival, even though everybody was really satisfied and happy with what happened at the festival, Billy still went out of his way to refund everybody.
Just amazing.
I thought that was just, man, what a genuinely nice thing to do,
Well, it was what, 8,000 people probably?
Yeah.
That's
tons and tons.
That's a big check.
It is. But it just shows you what kind of guy he was. I had always known just through the grapevine that he was just a genuinely nice guy, and then like dinner reaffirmed that with him, and then of course that gesture just blew us away.
Yeah, amazing. And slightly off topic, I guess he used Ringo Starr's private jet to get back to Nashville. Was that like lined up in advance? Do you know?
Well, we asked Bill, who's Billy's manager, and he's like, yeah, we had plans together. Like we had all sorts of plans to make sure something was going to happen in case something happened. Because of course, going into that, they knew that this was
the due date.
that
was.
his wife was 9 months pregnant. Like it was very possible, But yeah, and it all makes more sense now. I mean, I don't know if you saw, but Ringo Starr is putting out a record and Billy's on it, so makes all kinds of sense.
Yeah,
I think
and,
Molly's on it too. And
he's a Beatle.
I know.
That's a big
That's
deal.
insane.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty insane.
Okay, well, that wasn't so bad, right? And it seems like everybody I know growing up, at least during the Beatles era and beyond, you're either Beatles or Rolling Stones. One or the other. And I've always been, since a very, very young age, all about the Beatles when it comes to that era of classic rock. And honestly, that's irrelevant and not bluegrass related. But anyway, so yeah, felt like that was a good way to start season 2. Hopefully, and it was ironic that kind of started season 1, Mountain Grass Unit. So I think it went a little bit smoother this time. So now I'm going to take you to the highlight of the John Weisberger recordings, specifically part 2. It was such a good conversation. I had to make it 2 parts, 2 episodes. But anybody who has listened to just about everybody in progressive bluegrass and traditional bluegrass, for that matter, modern traditional bluegrass, has been influenced by John Weisberger's work. He is the most modest superstar. He has written with everybody in bluegrass. He has Grammy Awards. He has IBMA Awards. I can't replay both the episodes for you at this point. Go back and listen to them if you haven't heard them, especially if you're a music geek. You like the back end stuff. They're really both fascinating episodes. But in addition to just being a really entertaining episodes, it was the one that I felt like solidified for me that I'm going to keep at this. This is good stuff. We're going to make this work. T. Shaw's Progressive Bluegrass. And I couldn't do it without you as listeners. I really appreciate everybody that has been tuning in and following each episode and ideally telling friends and coming back for more. But now, before I start to tear up, we're going to go ahead and play a highlight from the John Weisberger episode. Well, you've kind of led into my next question, and I know we're starting to run short on time, but we briefly talked about this earlier. But I think a lot of the people listening today are probably extremely familiar with your work, and they don't even know it. It would be easier to come up with a list of people in the industry that you haven't co-written with than people that you have.
I've written with a lot of people, yeah.
And I'm under the impression 3 of the last 4 years, the Grammy-winning Best Bluegrass Album of the Year, you have been associated with in some shape or form.
That is possible. I think I know I have so if you get a Grammy nomination, you get a nice little medallion, and you also get a certificate that says you were nominated for a Grammy.
Now, if you co-wrote on that album, do you get one of those certificates and medallions as well?
Hang on a second.
Oh, but wait, there's more.
So last year, Aaron Allen and I wrote a song called California Sober with Billy Strings, and Billy and Willie Nelson recorded it, and that was nominated for a Grammy. So I have a medallion, and I have a certificate that says that they sent to me. If you participate in some way on a Grammy-winning album, for instance, if you were the engineer, or you played guitar on a session, or you wrote or co-wrote a song on that Grammy-winning album, then if you send the NARAS, the National Academy of Recording Arts and Sciences, which runs the Grammys, you write them a little check and you prove that you indeed participated in this album, and they will send you a participation certificate that says so-and-so participated in this Grammy-winning album. And I have now, I want to say 6 participation certificates, and then the 1 certificate from the nomination. So those 6 were from back in 2000, I really kind of lucked out in 2005. Del McCoury had an album called "The Company We Keep." It was the last album that Mike Bub played on, and that was nominated for a Grammy. And I had a song on there that I co-wrote with Mark Simo. So that was in 2005. And then there's a String Dusters album. There's a Travel McCoury's album. There's a Billy's Home album. There's an O'Connor band album. That's Mark O'Connor. I actually had a song
Well, you had
on
songs in
on
Renewal
that
as
album.
well. I believe it was also nominated.
It was, yes, it was nominated, but it didn't win.
Okay.
So I'm sorry. So these participations are for if an album wins, then you can get that. And so that might be it. Dell, String Dusters, Trav McCurry's, Billy, O'Connor. That's five. Okay, so five participation certificates and then the nomination. So yeah. So but that's all been there's 2005 and then like 2016 and 17 and 18 and 20 or 19. I forget the years, but it's been fairly recently. It's really paid off, and each one is very different. I wrote Home. Billy and I wrote four songs together for that one, including "Away from the Mire," which is really one of his biggest songs, the most popular songs. Um, O'Connor, I wrote one with Kate Lee O'Connor, who's married to Forrest O'Connor, Mark's son, and the two of them and Mark and his wife had this band called O'Connor for a couple of years. And actually, the first song Kate Lee and I wrote while she was still studying at Belmont got on that album. String Dusters, I think it was was it the Ladies and Gentlemen album, the with the duets with the female singers. No, it was no, it's the one. It's the one with the ship going over the. Yeah. What the heck is the name of that? And that had a song that Jeremy Garrett and I wrote called "A Hard Life Makes a Good Song," and that won a Grammy. And then the Travel McCurry's album, I had a song that I wrote on there with two songs I wrote on there with Alan Bartram, and then a song that me and Josh Schilling from Mountain Heart and Ronnie McCurry wrote together. Um, there's a photo somewhere out on social media because I remember posting a picture from that because we had one of those big fat pencils, and so we, we posted a picture of Ronnie holding the big pencil while we were writing the song.
That's amazing. Laws of Gravity was the Duster album that
Laws of Gravity,
I drew
yes,
a blank
yeah,
brain
yeah,
fart.
yeah, yeah. Same here.
So you don't win an actual Grammy trophy when that happens. You just get the participation
No,
medallion.
yes, and you have to buy it.
Really?
Yes,
Do you have to buy
it's not
an
it's not super
actual
expensive, but
trophy if you win a trophy too, or are those thrown in?
so the awards are really an interesting little rabbit hole to go down. So every award, the Grammys or the IBMA awards or pretty much anybody else, somewhere in the rules and regulations it specifies exactly who gets the award. And if
Okay.
you get the and but typically, I mean, it depends. Like with the Grammys, that's a big organization. They've got plenty of money, so everybody gets a. If you are nominated and you win, like if California Sober won, so that would have gone to that was a song award, so it would have gone to the songwriters and the artists, which would have been Billy and Willie Nelson, and maybe the record label or the producer or something like that. There's a bunch of people that they all get trophies. IBMA, at least it used to be the case, they would do like one trophy, and everybody had to fight over who was going to get the actual trophy, or send them a check, and then they would make more trophies. Jeremy Garrett, speaking of the String Dusters, Jeremy Garrett, the Bluegrass at the Crossroads project that I produced back in 2020 2021 during that stretch. That was the group it was Kristen Scott Benson, Jeremy Garrett, Darren Nicholson, Kevin Kerber, wonderful bass player who teaches music over at Warren Wilson College, and Skip Cherry Holmes on guitar, recorded the Earl Scruggs tune Ground Speed, and that won an IBMA award. And I remember buying the trophies for everybody because I wanted to make sure that everybody had one. And that award went to the artists and and the producer and the label.
So at least you got some recognition.
I feel very well recognized.
Sorry for the abrupt ending. If you like what you heard, make sure to go back and listen to episode 3 and 4 from earlier this season. Now we're going in a slightly unique direction. I'm having a friend come aboard to have a discussion about the Billy effect and how Billy Strings is affecting the bluegrass industry, both positive and negative, mostly positive. But we make the mistake. We come up with a good idea, at least we thought it was a good idea, that we were probably both under the influence, that after streaming a Billy Strings concert in Memphis, Tennessee, likely having a few adult beverages during the show, maybe even pre-show, and then immediately hopping online to record this podcast and talk about the Billy effect post-show. So we didn't even start until after midnight. And we had both probably been enjoying ourselves for 4 hours leading up to it. Needless to say, it's just a little bit sloppy. There was a lot of editing, a lot of imperfections, and a lot of opinions. There's no right or wrong. It's just opinions. It's two guys that get along really well, having a great conversation, specifically about Billy Strings and the Billy effect. So I got a couple pretty quick highlights from that episode I'm going to share with you. And, of course, you're welcome to listen to the entire episode, The Billy Effect, on T. Shaw's Progressive Bluegrass. Towards the beginning of the episode, we talk, both of us, about how we came to know Billy Strings initially. And that is where I'm going to take you now.
When we saw our Green Sky experience, I remember it was a 3-night run at the Wonder Ballroom, and we look at, okay, who are the opening acts? Like, we're coming after work or whatever. Are we going to make it? And I see Billy Strings, and I'm like, who has the balls to have a name Billy Strings? And you know, like,
Yes,
you're opening for this mega, jamgrass band, Green Sky, who's well established and getting bigger and bigger and growing year after year. And they had not headlined Red Rocks yet, but they were kind of, their fan base bigger and bigger and bigger. And I'm like, Billy Strings, wow, okay, I have to see this. What is this about? And it was the same thing, like within 10 seconds, solo. He didn't even have a band. I was like, oh shit. And we were back towards the soundboard, maybe creeping towards the middle of the room. And I needed to get closer. I needed to see what am I hearing? What's happening?
Kind of straightforward. Both just blown away first time we heard Billy. So now I'm going to talk about one of my human errors. This error I thought was entertaining enough to keep it. So I ran with it, even though I initially thought I was going to delete it. There's a lot of funny errors you people don't get to hear that don't make the final cut. So here's one that did.
That he was not going to go to because he was going to go see Keb Mo. And
I don't even know who Keb Mo is.
Keb Mo he's a famous blues musician. KB is in boy.
I should know that.
Yeah. Keb Mo.
I'm gonna edit that part.
Yeah, edit it. Definitely.
You're not gonna hear this, whoever you are. It's
so
gone.
Yeah.
Okay, this is another example of it's probably not the best idea for me to do a podcast in the AM hours after a long night of having a good time listening to a Billy Strings concert. But here's what happens when you do.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, and speaking of streaming, I got to interrupt. I apologize, but this is my first podcast ever that was not before noon. I mean, technically it's before noon. It's almost 1 a.m. Eastern time, And we both watched the Billy stream in Memphis on 12/6, and then launched this podcast post Billy. And I feel like we are missing an opportunity. It's time to do a shot. And you just opened a beer. That's what I call a kickoff.
Yeah.
But I feel like we
Yeah.
should do a shot because it's after hours. It's late night. It's why not? I ain't
Okay.
driving. Cheers to
Cheers,
the
brother.
Billy effect.
Yes. Yes. That was delicious.
So, as I mentioned, kind of sloppy. I apologize. But, it's fun to do something different. So now coming up was my interview with Katie Kirchner. Really more of a conversation. Katie Kirchner, who is Bluegrass behind the scenes superwoman. She does all kinds of things, and I talk about it in the episode. Primarily, we know each other as she manages and books Full Chord Bluegrass out of Michigan. Now, for some other odd, unknown reason, Full Chord's relationship with their banjo player reminds me of Spinal Tap. Only, unlike the drummer in Spinal Tap, nothing terrible happens to them. They just can't keep a banjo player. There's always something going on with their banjo players. But this particular banjo player we're about to talk about, Matthew Davis, who had a conversation with Jared Walker once. And I told Jared Walker that Matthew Davis is the greatest banjo player I've ever seen. And at the time he heard me say that, he's like, that's a bold statement. He didn't correct me. He didn't argue. But he mentioned, that's a bold statement. And it kind of, at the time, I was a little intimidated. For a while, I was thinking, next time I see him, I want to be like, yeah, you're right. I was probably pushing my luck. And then after a couple months, we didn't see each other. Actually, I turned my thought around to, no. It's absolutely true. Matthew Davis is the best banjo player I've ever seen, period, bar none. And I've seen some really, really good ones. But that's neither here nor there. Let's jump into my conversation with Katie Kirchner, where we happen to mention Matthew Davis. And kind of mentioning banjo players, I discovered Matthew Davis
Matthew
after
Davis.
his time in Full
Yep.
Chord, and
Yep.
then found out that he used to play with Full Chord
Yep.
before
And
I knew
Circus
Full
Number
Chord.
9.
And
Right, but you were aware of Circus Number 9.
yes, and that's where I
Yeah.
initially was introduced to Matthew. And I'm going to go out on a limb because you really can't ever prove me wrong or anybody wrong. It's an opinion, but he's the best banjo player I've ever witnessed.
Ding ding. I think he is one of the best banjo players I've ever heard. Yeah, he
Just
he really is.
mind
Um,
blowing.
Here's another thing about full court. It's very strange. The banjo players. We've already talked about, some switch up in musicians. We had one banjo player that left to because he's a train engineer. That's a big job. It's a dream job, for a lot of people. And he's got a pension on the line. And there should be a song written about that. But the other banjo player, Matthew Davis, he left to go to school to become a priest. There's also a song there. It's just been, we have good stories to tell, but they've played with some of the best musicians in the world. Matthew Davis is one of Bela's kind of proteges. He, ohm banjos are some of Bela's favorites, and I think has possession of an ohm that was Bela's that he sold to him.
I didn't
Yeah.
know that they worked together. I mean, was he an instructor? I never knew that.
I don't know if he took lessons with him or just kind of in a mentorship role. I'm not quite sure how in depth that got, but I know there's a few folks out there that Bela's kind of taken under his wing in that regard, and Matthew was one of them.
Well, I know there was one time you pulled him out of retirement to help you out.
Hmm.
Is there
Yes.
ever a possibility that might happen again?
There is a possibility that that can happen again. That was a fluke too. He doesn't usually have his phone with him, and he happened to be on spring break. at the seminary. And
Okay.
I called and he answered and I was like, "Hey, the guys are going to Telluride for the band competition. Are you in?" And he was like, "Absolutely." And it was a lucky stars kind of moment.
It's kind of bringing a ringer to the contest.
It is. It is. It was a trade-off. So we toured for 2 weeks. I put a tour together out there and we toured for 2 weeks, drove out there. We picked him up in Lincoln, Nebraska, where he's going to school. The trade-off was we had to make sure he got to a Catholic service every single day and Latin service if available. And I made sure he got to service every day, but the final day when we had to drive back.
That is amazing. And
Yep.
I certainly want to ask you a question about one of the most unique aspects of band management and one of the things
Yeah.
you never expected you'd be doing. That's got to be on a short list.
It's one of those things you never thought you'd have to ask.
Never would have dreamed you'd have to ask about a Catholic church service in Latin. Imagine that, Ryder. But anyway, next I'm going to bring up a brief highlight about, in my opinion, one of the best marketing ideas a band could ever possibly do. Let's go there now.
Yeah,
You had
yeah.
mentioned to me one time that you will replace a full cord lighter when it becomes empty.
Absolutely. Yep.
I will have a full cord lighter for the rest of my life. I've
Good.
got
I'm
two
glad.
of them. I've
You're
got to
not
trade
alone.
in now.
So yeah, if you buy a lighter from us and it runs out of fluid and you bring it to the booth, you will get a new lighter.
That's amazing. I'm holding on to them.
Do it.
I will. And that's amazing marketing. If you should almost advertise that at the merch booth because everybody's gonna always have a full cord lighter, knowing that they can get it replaced.
You're right. When we hang up, I'm gonna go make a sign. You're not wrong about that.
I mean, because nobody would ever. Oh no! Don't throw it out. That's a lifetime lighter,
And it gets them back to a show.
and it gets them back to a show. Absolutely. Yeah, that's genius marketing.
Yep. Can't purchase them online. They're only available at shows. So, yep.
And since we were talking about lighters and you mentioned the story, tell us the lighter
Oh,
story.
boy.
It's a good one.
So it is a good one. Hoxeyville up here in Michigan, not this past summer, but the summer before. The guys are out on stage playing, and I look down and I see a red cowbell. And I hold it up, and Brian looks at me and says, "Yeah." So he runs side stage and he grabs the cowbell from me. And I run off to go grab some drumsticks from a friend of ours that's backstage so that Brian can, have some fun. They have fun. That's what I'm saying. Well, Brian didn't want to wait for the drumsticks. So, side stage, he sees somebody's lighter sitting out on an amplifier in the sun,
Not a
grabs it,
full cord lighter, by the way.
not a full cord lighter, grabs it, goes back to the microphone and starts to play rhythm, gets into the second beat, and the lighter explodes. Poof, smoke. It cut his ear, and he's up there bleeding.
Oh, I had no idea he was
And
hurt from it because he
oh yeah,
kept
the
playing.
plastic ripped. Yeah, he did. The plastic ripped right through his ear. There is video of it out there, and it is hilarious. And it's hilarious to watch it multiple times at the different responses of band members. Grant backs away because he doesn't know what's blowing up next. Ricky stops playing and looks at Brian like, "Oh my gosh, are you okay?"
He's lucky he didn't lose
It
an
was
eye.
ridiculous. He is very lucky he didn't lose an eye, and he had his in-ear monitors in, and it was so loud, and Todd was standing right behind him, and it would have hurt his ear because it exploded right next to his face.
Full Cord Band, the only bluegrass band that I know of that has pyrotechnics as part of their show. But anyway, one of the next things we talk about just came up in the news. We had this conversation before this announcement was made, but Southwest Airlines has discontinued the 2 free bag policy. For most of you, that probably isn't a big deal at all. But I found this quote on social media from Becky Buller, one of the bands that Katie manages. I'm going to try and read it. "The skies became a lot less friendly for us this week. Southwest Airlines doesn't love us anymore. Becky Buller Band exclusively flies Southwest because they've been the most affordable and kindest to us musicians. I'll also add that overnight baggage is now $200 one way, so we're currently rethinking our 2 boxes of sound gear. We love getting to share music with y'all, and we'll keep doing it as long as we're able. Becky Buller. $400 round trip if they're just flying there and back. That's a big dent, and that's just their sound gear. Every musician has an instrument. What do they do with the instrument? If they each have to be charged $50 each way, that's another $100 per band member. If there's 3, 4, 5 band members, there's another $500. This doesn't include boxes of merch or suitcases of merch. This single decision has made being a bluegrass musician on a budget that much harder to do. Here's a quote from Missy Raines. Let's say you don't typically fly Southwest Airlines, so you don't think this affects you, but you love going to see live music. So then you'd be wrong. Trust me, this is going to affect who you get to see perform going forward, because Southwest has been the airline of choice for many musicians for a lot of years at an affordable option. This is because the profit margin for most bands in certain markets is incredibly thin and getting thinner. Ways to help. Go to live shows and concerts. Buy tickets in advance. If you are streaming your music and don't buy CDs anymore, pay for a CD anyway and leave the CD on the table. Buy soft goods, t-shirts, caps, etc. If you are streaming your music, be sure to press that follow button of the artists you love. Love you all, Missy Rain. This is going to be a big impact for all musicians in bluegrass. And ironically, just a few short weeks prior, Katie and I had a conversation about this. I'm going to take you there now. I couldn't imagine. No.
I know. And he's always in airports. Most of our meetings happen while he is in airports.
No
'Cause
thanks.
it takes like 4 flights for him to get home.
I could never be a
So,
professional musician for that reason alone. I don't mind road trips,
yeah.
but airplanes, airports, no way. Just, hauling your instruments
Yeah.
on
Oh,
board
yeah.
and fighting, no.
Oh, man. It's
No.
such a nightmare. These airlines, maybe someday, maybe when I grow up and become an adult, maybe that's something I'll start doing is lobbying for that kind of thing because this is their livelihood. Something's got to give. I don't know. It's a real struggle, and it's such a high level of anxiety for these people. Flying and travel is already full of anxiety and mishaps. But when you are depending on your instrument to feed your family, and somebody's giving you a hard time about putting it in the overhead, even though it fits, and you're so scared you're going to get kicked off the flight and then miss, a $10,000 or $15,000 gig that would feed everybody. The anxiety that comes along with that is a shame,
And never
and it
knowing
it
on
shouldn't
every
be the
flight
case.
which ones are going to cooperate
Every
and which ones aren't.
every single flight, every single flight. There are laws in the United States only that once you are on the actual plane, once you've crossed that step onto the plane and you have your instrument with you, they cannot make you take your instrument off. So it has to fit in the overhead, or you can buy a seat for it, or on occasion, if you have a nice, what do they call them now? Flight attendants. Thank you. They have a closet that on occasion they'll help a musician with, but they always fit in the overheads, always. But it's always a problem. So I really wish that kind of anxiety could lessen for them.
And I don't see that happening anytime soon. So now I'm going to take you to one of the highlights of the Sean Spencer interview from Greenwood Rye. Now, this is a terrific episode. It's also the first episode that I intertwined music with. I was quite proud of myself and a little intimidated at first, but figured it out, so I'm going to be able to do that again. That's exciting. But the question that I felt like, if you made it to the end of the episode, that we all really want to know is, why are you not allowed to request Rocky Top? It's become the Freebird of bluegrass. And Sean and I have a terrific conversation about it. Let me take you there now. We had mentioned this briefly, just as more of a complete and total side note distraction.
Yeah.
But I'm sure the listeners are as curious as I am. Rocky Top's become the free bird of requests that you're not allowed to make or you're not supposed to make. The throw rotten tomatoes at you. Don't boo. Don't make that request.
Right.
But I really enjoy the song Rocky Top.
Right.
It's kind of sucks that it's the classic don't you dare request that.
Right.
Why does Rocky Top have that reputation when it's actually a pretty good song?
Oh, it's a great song. Legendary song. And it's one that, definitely has crossed over to the mainstream. And so people outside of the bluegrass world, know it and have heard it. And, and it's made its way into being the official song of the University of Tennessee's like football team and all this. So it ends up being kind of it turns the bluegrass players into kind of a caricature a little bit when it's like when the person requesting it is just
a drunk jock.
Well, yeah. Well, they're just aligning their knowledge in their head of the only two things in their head in the line are I know Rocky Top and that's a banjo, and then just like connecting those two dots and just having to shout it out for the whole room that they made that connection is a bit irritating.
Boo,
I mean, it's funny. It's funny. We have this at Jane's Hideaway. We have this blacklist on the wall of like songs we're not allowed to play.
I'm gonna guess Rocky Top.
Rocky Top's
Wagon
on there.
Wheel.
Yeah, Wagon Wheel's on there.
Is Freebird on there? Is it even necessary?
Freebird's not on there.
Okay.
At this point, but part of the blacklist, and the funny thing is, I made the blacklist, so
and you put it right next.
But
to the
I put it up there. I put it up there so that I can like absolve myself of the blame when someone comes up and requests.
It's against the rules.
When someone comes up and I'm letting you into the secret here. T. Shaw's Progressive Bluegrass listeners will now know that someone comes up and requests Rocky Top. I have this blacklist on the wall to point to. Hey, it's not. I can't. We're not allowed to play it. Sorry, it's not.
It's against management.
Yeah. Little did they know, I made the list myself and could change it at any time.
If there's an extra zero next to the tip,
right?
Maybe we can scratch that out.
Certainly, for the right amount of money, I will take that blacklist off the wall and rip it into pieces in the tip jar. No, but for me, it comes down to like the way that they request it's very important. Like if it's a very serious request, then if it seems very genuine, then we'll play it. Like it's not like we're not that opposed to playing Rocky Top. But when it's a group that comes in and University
or something.
Well, University of Tennessee jerseys or something, and then like the football team just won, play Rocky Top. That's when you point to the blacklist and say, sorry, because they're not listening to a musical performance.
Right.
They're not wanting.
It's not part of the show.
They're not wanting a cool version of it. They're not. They're trying to take over the thing for their own needs, and that's fine in a way. Like you want to always play to the crowd, but like when one person in the crowd tries to take over the show for the rest of the crowd, that's kind of when it becomes a problem. People that make requests that are very sincere and genuine and cool songs, it's like, oh yeah, you get what's going on here.
Sure.
You're a part of this process. You
want to enhance the experience for the audience.
Yeah, and you want to participate. But people who come in and request like, Tennessee whiskey or something, that's another one on the blacklist. Or honestly, Wagon Wheel used to get requested a lot. It's kind of really faded off. Or like here's a good example. The song from "O Brother Where Art Thou," "Man of Constant Sorrow," get that request a lot. Another example of like, another example of like being a caricature of a bluegrass band and people connecting. The only two dots they know because they saw that movie and they like it, and they like the song, and it's not like they're being
not
mean.
Trashing
they're not being
It's just
mean.
what they know when it comes to bluegrass.
Right. And so like my rule that I always say is like, if they request the song as the actual title of the song correctly, can you play "Man of Constant Sorrow"?
Not just the sorrow song from "Oh Brother Where Art Thou."
Yeah. If they say, can you play that song from "Oh Brother Where Art Thou," or y'all know any Soggy Bottom Boys? Like the answer is no. Like that's kind of disrespectful. And so you point to the blacklist and you say you can't do it. But that's why the bluegrass just don't like it. Is because it turns them into a caricature. And especially in Nashville, you go down to Broadway, and certainly there's lots of University of Tennessee fans there. They want to hear the song. Whatever band is or artist or whatever, you can tip them down there and they'll play a bastardized version of it. Bastardized is the wrong word. I don't mean they're bastardizing it. I mean not true to the Osborne Brothers original, in any way, which is fine because what the vibe is we're just kind of having a party and that's it. But like to separate ourselves from that type of band where you're saying like, no, we're doing something a little different here. We're all listening, experience music, and we've got a lot of songs planned for y'all. And another thing I always say is like, when someone makes a request that I don't want to play, I say, look, that's a cool song. It's a cool request. Validate it. We don't usually do that one, but I'll make you a deal. Like we have a lot of cool songs planned. Any songs we play in the next set list, if you don't like it, any of them, like come up and let us know, and we will play, "Sweet Child of Mine" instead, or whatever they said.
Wow. So you're giving them the opportunity.
Yeah, to say like, but that's never happened.
I never really would have thought about that with Rocky Top specifically, and I've always just prior to, because I genuinely like the song, and I think it's a great bluegrass anthem, and now we know. And as G.I. Joe would say, knowing is half the battle. Oh wait, that's a different podcast. Regardless, it's good to know. So now I'm gonna take you to the Heady Wax Fiends episode with Chris Howland. As I've now mentioned in multiple episodes, he is doing some just fantastic work in the music scene as a whole, but specifically bluegrass. He's doing some things that have not been done, including getting classic, long out of print bluegrass albums repressed, oftentimes in a unique variant for Heady Wax Fiends. So with that, we're going to jump into the conversation I was having with Chris and how the record production aspect of Heady Wax Fiends began. But before we do that, just a quick reminder that I flubbed the sound on this episode. My software updated 3 minutes before we were scheduled to go live, and the split track feature where we each can be recorded in our own tracks went updated to the pro version, and I had to pay more in order to receive it. And with 3 minutes to spare, I decided to go with the free version, which was single track, and I heavily regretted it. Long story short, in order for you to hear him, I had to amplify all kinds of background noise on my end, my very squeaky chair, my writing and taking notes, my drinking water with ice cubes, all the things that, well, I'm my own worst critic. I apologize about the sound. But as I mentioned during the episode, the interview was fantastic. Too good not to share. So now let me take you there.
You have gotten a hold of previously out of print vinyls. Or vinyl, sorry. I know the S doesn't belong. Vinyls. You have gotten a hold of records that have been out of press for years and years and years, and managed to convince the owners of said records to re-release exclusively on vinyl, I believe, starting with Bella Fleck Drive. Is that correct?
That is correct. And this is just another really serendipitous story of the power of the Facebook group. So there's a company, they specialize in finding the licensing on stuff that's out of print or that maybe was like digital only stuff that like was released after the heyday of vinyl to get it to a vinyl pressing, and they're called Real Gone Music. A lot of people know Real Gone Music because they've been really big in like the Grateful Dead Dix Picks repressings. But they, a couple years ago, they repressed the seminal John Hartford's Aerial Link. And a link had made it to the Facebook group, and it was from an independent record store that was selling their allotment of that repress. And then we figured out where it was coming from, and I posted the link from them direct. And then, we're called Fiends for a reason. That group just destroyed that availability. That
sold it out in like 30 minutes or something.
Yeah, it was insane. So they were like, what the hell's going on? Well, like I think there might have been this idea that perhaps they were hacked or that something was wrong with the website. They end up finding
Yeah, is there Chinese billing addresses?
Yeah, exactly. So they go to their analytics of their traffic, and they find that there's a lot of it coming from a post in a Facebook group by a guy named Chris Holland. And he, I think maybe there was a little trepidation there for a while. They didn't really understand what we were doing or who we were. But then Gordon Anderson, one of my really close friends now in this whole thing, he reached out and was like, "Hey man, that was impressive. We do a lot of music that I think people in this group would really like. We'll get you some promo codes, and you can pre-announce some of the stuff in the group, and it works for both of us, right? Like, I get more eyes on the group. He sells more pre-orders." And I was talking to him, and to tell you the truth, I was so close to not proposing the record club to him because I was so young in this career at that point. And I said, "You know what?"
And slightly intimidated, I'm sure.
Massively intimidated. I mean, you get to make aerial plane again. Like, I'm doing, I at that point I was doing stuff primarily with my friends and my friends' friends, right? And so I shot my shot, and I was like, "Hey man, we have this vinyl record subscription club," and I kind of let him into the details. So he sits on it for a couple weeks and comes back, and he starts to explain to me, and I won't get really deep into it, the licensing process for some of my favorite records. Who owns them, how hard they are to get, what it takes to do. So he kind of gives me a list of labels where he said, "You can have a complete exclusive for 24 months of pretty much any record under these labels." And Rounder was there, Vanguard was there, Flying Fish was there. And that's all I needed to start, Trevor. I mean, you know that.
That's more than enough.
Yeah. So I started to look at, like, who the biggest influences on my favorite music. That was definitely a determining factor. And the second factor was, let's blow up the secondary market on some of these out-of-print albums that are really hard to find, some that I'd never bought because they're too expensive. So I came up with this list immediately, and it was four albums: Bale Fleck Drive, J.D. Crowe and the New South, self-titled, Rounder 44, right? The Tony Rice Unit, Manzanita, and Doc Watson, self-titled. So,
and I was going to save the Tony Rice for last, but keep going.
Yeah, so I made the deal immediately for those four, and then I didn't want to put them all out at the same time or very close to each other. So, I decided that I thought maybe the biggest splash would be Bela Fleck Drive. So we started with that one. The reception was great. And then, I was, at the same time, the last time you and I hung out in person at Bender Jamboree in 2019, I was partying one night with a bunch of people. I had a poolside room, so we'd get some artists that would stop by after their sets. And my wife Chelsea and I were hanging out with Jared Walker, and he was playing us some tunes in the hotel room, right? And it's one of the best nights we've had. And, I'd had a couple...
That whole festival.
Yeah,
Yes.
well, just everybody was equal, I felt like. Like, I was hanging out with artists as much as friends. And I'd had a couple cocktails, and I was telling him that, in my opinion, which I don't know anything really about Bluegrass, that I'd always thought that there was a handful of albums that were really, really influential on my favorite bands. And those would be, the aforementioned Hartford Aeroplane, and Old and the Way. And he was like, "Yeah, I can definitely see that," because, he knew how much I loved Yonder. And I segued into Green Sky Bluegrass, and then I segued into their band. And he started talking about Rounder 44, and I didn't know what the hell he was talking about. And he told me that I had to hear it before I could have that conversation again, basically. And he actually wrote a little note for us with a little drawing and the set list from that night. And we made a shadow box, and we got home of all of our mementos of that. And it's hanging up right next to our bed. So for years, I'd walk past this thing, and it said J.D. Crowe in the New South, parentheses, Rounder 44. So I was like, I'm going to do that one for Jared. And I had him write, expanded new liner notes for it. So that one was a really big get for me personally. And there was this resurgence of Tony Rice repressings happening that we kind of spearheaded with grabbing those rights to Manzanita a few years earlier. And I'd say without a doubt, to this point, it's the most popular thing we've done.
If you haven't yet heard the Chris Howland and Hetty Wax Fiend story in full, please go back and check it out. Probably my most entertaining episode that I've done, unexpectedly so, or maybe it was expected, but just a really, really great episode. And get involved with Hetty Wax Fiends if you're a vinyl record person. Even if you're just a music person, I think it's going to be worth your time and trouble. Go back and listen to that. Now coming up is my episode with James Key from East Nashgrass. Also an episode well worthy of listening to its entirety, but I've got a few key highlights. The first, starting with my, weird sense of humor. We'll go there now.
Some of them have been announced. The most exciting thing that I can think of that has been announced is we have our own night at the Ryman Auditorium in July. That's July 15th. It's going to be us and AJ Lee and Blue Summit. We're really excited. We played the Ryman 3 different times in opening capacities, so this is our first night ever on our own. So that is certainly a bucket list item in general, but great thing to have on the schedule for this year. And we've also got for the first time.
Hey, can I just briefly interrupt?
Sure. Yeah.
On the night at the Ryman, you had made a social media post because Bluegrass Night at the Ryman, for those of us that don't know, is sponsored by Springer Mountain Farms. And
correct.
You had commented, looking forward to giving away chicken at the Ryman. And I can't help but envision, because you guys have a pretty good sense of humor, that of you throwing live chickens into the audience.
I would love to do something like that. The folks at Springer Mountain Farms are really nice folks, and they do a great thing for the music business. I don't know how well it would be perceived to give away chickens in any capacity other than, I think they do actually, they give some away, but I think they give like a gift card or something, because we'd always joked that it would be great to like deliver some raw chicken to some folks in the audience, just right there on the spot, no cooler or anything. Just bring out some dripping wet raw chicken. But I don't know. I kind of doubt that they would be super into that. When you're in the business that they are in, you have to be careful about marketing, because chicken is great in general. We all love chicken, but it's also like you have to market it a certain way, because there's aspects of it that are maybe kind of gross, So you have to be sensitive to that, I'm sure. I'm not in the food business, so I'm just making some general assumptions. But yes, I would love to give away live chickens, raw chickens, but however, it's probably just going to be a gift card.
Well, is it not better to ask for forgiveness than permission?
I thought about that, but I would really love to get asked back in the years after 2025. It took us a while to get to this point, so. But you never know what other, smoked or cured meats that we may give away. We don't know.
I just have to be there.
You just have to be there at the show to see, because we have gave away smoked and cured meats on stage before, and it could happen again.
Man, I hope he reconsiders and throws chickens of some kind, perhaps with a catapult. Or would that be a chicken pult? All right, well, next up, we got talking about this conversation, as most of you should know. If you don't, many of you do know. The motivation behind this podcast is to market my mortgage business, my day job. It's how I pay the bills. And I mentioned this to James, that it was kind of like the Flat and Scruggs TV show at the Grand Ole Opry, where you had Martha White's Flower as a primary sponsor. And T. Shaw's Progressive Bluegrass's primary sponsor is Trevor Shaw at Chat Mortgage. And then he went on to tell me that he owns the guitar Earl Scruggs used in that show, and he's currently having it restored. So let me take you there to the story behind Earl Scruggs' guitar from the Grand Ole Opry.
Want to get back to music just a little bit. Another thing that I know that you are participating in is you have Earl Scruggs's guitar that he played on the Flatt and Scruggs at the Grand Ole Opry TV show. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes, that is correct.
How did that come about?
That was a right place, right time thing for me. Um, I've been a big Flatt and Scruggs fan, of course, my whole life because I'm into bluegrass. And my granddad played banjo and played guitar fingerstyle like Earl did. And learned to play, with Earl's book. And got to meet Earl a couple different times here in Nashville. He lived in Nashville. My granddad did. And even met Earl one time out at Rivergate Mall. Earl was judging a banjo contest at Rivergate Mall in the 80s.
No kidding.
And met my granddad, and this would have been about 1983 or 84. I think it was 84 because Earl told him about his new line of banjos that was coming out. He had his first Earl Scruggs model. There was 1984 of them made in 1984. And Earl signed all of them on the inside label with a white pen. I have number 179. It was my granddad's. And my granddad he loved
I have
Earl
an autographed Earl Scruggs poster promoting his banjo line with Gibson.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
It's autographed actually to my father, and my father didn't even know he had it.
Earl was so approachable for his entire life, man. He was a very humble guy and obviously such an important figure in our music. And so I knew that they had that guitar for sale. They listed it at a very exorbitant price that seemed to scare away most people. To be totally honest, the guitar was in terrible playing condition, and I think that's what deterred so many people with the price tag that it had, especially. It's kind of like buying a house that needs to be remodeled. A lot of people can't see past that, and I get it.
And maybe
I've
they're
always
asking
been,
the after remodeled price.
yeah, and they probably were. And it's another one of those things. It's a piece of memorabilia, so it's very hard to put a price comp on that. It's a very unique thing. It's one of one, so it makes sense to have a very prestigious price for something that is so documented because there's no more documented guitar that Earl ever owned. This guitar, to give a quick history lesson, was bought brand new by Opry star Don Gibson in 1955. It is a 55 D18. Don immediately took it to Shot Jackson downtown on Broadway down there, and had Shot do some conversions or whatever you want to call it, alterations, I guess, to it. I don't know why Don did this, but it was kind of common for country stars to make their guitars kind of flashy and so forth back in those days. And so he had him thin the neck down. It's thin like a Telecaster. And in doing so, Shot was worried that it would bow up. So Shot put a truss rod in it. It has a Gibson truss rod in it. So if you look in all those Martha White videos, it's got a little white, it had a white truss rod cover in those years. And that's odd to people see because it's a Martin guitar. They didn't have truss rods.
They didn't have truss
on.
rods. I'm going to go back and watch one after we get off this interview. I'm going to go watch a video tonight.
Yeah, so it was a real working truss rod under that truss rod cover, and then it also had the big pick guard, which makes it very recognizable. It covered like literally half the top. It looks black in the Martha White black and white videos. It was a cheap plastic pick guard, but it was like a tortoise shell pick guard. So those were the two things that literally and made for being on the Opry. And so Don had those things done to it. And he started playing it on the Opry, which would have been at the Ryman Auditorium in these years. And Earl evidently really liked this guitar. I don't know, he would play it backstage. I don't know what his capacity with Don Gibson was. But he evidently kept hounding Don to sell it to him. And finally Don did in 1957. So that's when you started seeing that guitar show up in the Martha White shows. Is 57 and beyond. Earl basically owned it the rest of his life, other than a brief period where Larry Perkins had that guitar in the early 80s. But the guitar, to make a long story short, was in a pretty bad state of disrepair. And it had been sitting at Gruen Guitars for a long time. The Scruggs family still owned it, and it had had a few different price reductions. And I don't know. I woke up one morning and kind of felt compelled to go down there, and I looked on the website to see what they had, and I couldn't believe that they still had the guitar. And they had cut the price in half from where it started. And so I went down there and I played it, and I wouldn't say that I loved it at all because
It was in rough shape.
it was in rough shape, but I did like it a lot. It's been getting some pretty extensive restoration done at Hugh Hanson's shop. I'm hoping it'll be ready to go by this summer, particularly for our night at the Ryman. That's kind of
Oh, that'd be awesome.
my deadline that I gave you, because I knew it would take a long time for him to do everything that needs to be done. But we're basically going to get it where it's immediately recognizable, like it was, with the big pick guard, with the truss rod, all of that, and get it in really probably better playing condition than it ever was before. But it was just a once in a lifetime thing that I had to do, and I've never regretted it for 1 minute after I did it. And those pieces of memorabilia, they're similar to real estate in the same capacity. And it's like sometimes when there's something really unique, or there's not a good or recent price
No
comp,
comparable.
nobody knows how to really sink their teeth into what the value is. And then when you see somebody actually spend the money on it, the FOMO sets in for everybody else, that it should be played. And so that's the mission that I've been on ever since I acquired it, was to get it where I can, I can play this thing and my friends can play it and we can enjoy it and the guitar can speak again. Because one day I'll be dead and gone and this guitar will still be out there. That's the beautiful thing, is like the instruments are very similar to real estate, the things in real estate that we love, which is that we're just caretakers of this stuff. So it's your job to be the best steward that you can be, and then try to leave it in the best condition that you can. And so that's what I'm trying to do with that guitar. And I was very honored that the opportunity came along and that I was able to do something with it. And we have even bigger plans, after getting it ready to play. I would love to do a record with it. That's in the very early stages of discussion, but we would like to feature it on a recording with a lot of guests, where we can have a lot of different people get that guitar to speak, because I think it has a lot more speaking left to do.
Well, there you go. There's a few good highlights from season 2, and I'm going to come back and do a quick wrap up. But first, most of you may have noticed, if this is the first time listening, you haven't noticed, you've been missing out. Not at any point in this episode I have played a message from our sponsor. So take a quick minute and we'll be right back. 1, 2.
It's a big purchase, it's a big deal. Trevor Shaw knows exactly how you feel for refinance or a new home. Trevor Shaw will help you get your loan. Trevor Shaw will help you get your loan.
Hello, I'm Trevor Shaw. I'm not just a Bluegrass aficionado. I'm a Bluegrass aficionado that's a mortgage loan officer at Chat Mortgage in Chattanooga, Tennessee. I'd be honored for the opportunity to help you get your residential mortgage loan or refinance anywhere in Tennessee and Georgia. From veterans using their hard-earned benefits to first-time home buyers needing down payment assistance to retirees finally getting the home they've always dreamed of. Call or text me today at 864-50-TSHAW. That's 864-50-TSHAW.
It's a big purchase, it's a big deal. Trevor Shaw knows exactly how you feel for refinance or a new home. Trevor Shaw will help you get your loan. Trevor Shaw will help you get your loan.
Chat Mortgage is powered by Almeida Mortgage Corporation, NMLS number 271603. Chat Mortgage is located at 6650 East Brainerd Road, Suite 208 in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Phone number 423-591-9801. Trevor Shaw, NMLS number 929381. Well, that wasn't too bad, was it? It's a big purchase. It's a big deal. Sorry. I'm very proud of it. I wrote it myself. Randy Steele and the High Cold Wind performed it. John Bower of Randy Steele and the High Cold Wind produced it. And I'm pretty excited about it. I'm going to see if I can come up with something a little different, though, for next season, season 3, coming up much, much sooner than season 1 into season 2. I've learned so much since then. I'm going to be able to jump back into it a whole lot faster. I'm getting new hardware, new software. Have really learned a ton. I'm sure most of you have noticed. Some of you are still pretty critical. But hey, if you're out there and you know somebody I need to talk to, or you are somebody I want to talk to, or you think I'm a dork and should go away, email me, progressivebluegrass@gmail.com. Send me a note. I don't check it every day. Might not even check it every week if I'm busy. But reach out. I'd love to hear from you. progressivebluegrass@gmail.com. Anyway, this is T. Shaw from T. Shaw's Progressive Bluegrass. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And go back and listen to some of those episodes you might have missed in Season 1 or Season 2. And Season 3 is going to be right around the corner. I've got a lot of great guests lined up. Really looking forward to getting back to the microphone at T. Shaw's Progressive Bluegrass. You guys are the best. Thanks again for listening.